It was a term that was used by the Catholic Church to propagate the faith. Toward the end of the 19th century and early 20th century, it began to change and be seen as a synonym for publicity. But during World War I, it became very much typecast as the idea of getting people to believe what you want them to believe, using a variety of heavy-handed techniques such as emotion.
There's a million definitions of propaganda, but I would say that propaganda is an effort to use portions of the truth to tell a lie, to push people in a direction by deceiving them. The most common way that we're misled is in believing that some other country means us ill. They have weapons of mass destruction, for example, just to pull an example out of the Gulf War, or that the people in that country are some sort of monsters, inherently evil, that are trying to destroy us, and we've got to destroy them first. It's honestly, it's in this country at least, I think it's been easiest to sell propaganda in the service of war.
At night, over several months, his heart pounding, Daniel Ellsberg copies thousands of Defense Department documents. Proof the U.S. government was lying about its role in the Vietnam War. Ellsberg exposes that lie to the world.
The New York Times has started publication of a series of reports based on a top-secret Pentagon study of the Vietnam War.
The central fact so far revealed is that there was a massive deception of the American public for starting the bombing of North Vietnam.
Propaganda has changed as much as the technology for putting the propaganda out there. I think there was a saying in the Bush administration that called it, somebody referred to it as catapult the propaganda. And so I think we found new ways to catapult the propaganda. Social media is certainly a way, and I think we've seen it just in the last month, how that I think propaganda about the 2020 election was spread by social media.
In a stunning display from a sitting president, Donald Trump launching an assault on the integrity of the election, unleashing a barrage of false claims of fraud and corruption without evidence.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us.
During the First World War, discovered that the professionalization of propaganda within the federal government, the melding of propaganda with public relations, bringing in people who were already pretty good at selling products, but had never really been engaged or thought about selling ideas, and realizing that a product and an idea are really not that different from one another. And so when public relations got involved in the selling of ideas and in the spinning of narratives and in the political context, I think everything changed. I think that's the hinge point in the history of propaganda.
But the beginning of systematic, pervasive government propaganda really begins in World War I. The Committee on Public Information, and in other countries, the ministries of propaganda that operated there, for the first time began to take on propaganda as a scientific endeavor. Since then, those ministries of propaganda have disappeared, but the techniques and mindset that animated them has continued. And so we can now say that propaganda is a regular feature of American government. It accelerates during wartime, but it exists in all times. And in some cases is more powerful because we know more about how we can influence people because of psychological techniques. We know the chemistry of the brain, and that gives us a greater capacity to shape what people think.
A couple of these voting machine companies are suing Fox News for defamation, and that's a way that they can be held accountable. I think there are some people who would like to shut them down. I think that's probably going too far and is not constitutional, but there are ways that when they do engage in in behavior that's illegal, or in the case of commit defamation, that they can be held accountable.
Well, I think my book, Manipulating the Masses, shows that the public can be misled. It can be misled, for example, to believe the German spies were everywhere in the United States, and they weren't. In fact, only one spy was ever apprehended and convicted. Only one spy was apprehended and convicted in all of World War I. Well, we don't have propaganda ministries. Propaganda now is done by individual agencies. It's become, as I said, more scientific. It's become routine as opposed to a wartime activity. I think it's become more powerful because in many respects journalism is under siege. There are fewer reporters in Washington to clarify the situation, and many of those who profess to be journalists are really biased commentators rather than information seekers. Well, fake news is a kind of propaganda. Lying is a kind of propaganda. And of course, the best fake news is fake news that has some elements of truth to it to make it look persuasive, but also elements that are distorted and not true. You can think of some today that are propaganda, like claiming that the election was completely fraudulent when that's not true. Even President Trump's lawyers or judges that he appointed have ruled against the claim that the election was rigged. But during the McCarthy era, there was terrible propaganda put out about communists lurking everywhere in the government. During World War I, there was propaganda about spies being everywhere. Propaganda is a way of life. I think there are some iron laws of propaganda, and one of them is when people sincerely believe in their point of view and believe it's urgent that other people accept that point of view. And that could be in cases where the people are good people and even democratic, but believe that their point of view is so absolutely essential to the country. The temptation to use all of the tools that are available are always there. And of course, it's even more tempting when you don't have standards and you don't really believe in democracy. The interesting thing about the story of the Committee on Public Information is this propaganda, which was often over the top and highly emotional and tendentious, was done by people who were actually some of our more reputable Americans who were good, decent people who really believed in democracy. But they couldn't avoid pulling the levers that would get them the result they wanted and short-circuit the democratic process. Well, one book leads to another, and so over time, I've looked at a lot of international issues and international reporting, international journalism, and it became clear to me that the story of the Committee on Public Information, which is our first and only propaganda ministry in the history of our country, deserved to be told. And there's nothing like taking on a study or a story that's never been told before and doing the research.
The media's responsibility, and I think you're seeing just in the last year that news media have become more aware of their responsibility and of their ability to do something about this. So you had for the first 4 years of Donald Trump's, maybe first 3 or 4 years of Donald Trump's time as a national figure, that news organizations like the New York Times, CBS News, ABC would not use the word lie. They were not willing to say he lied, and it only sort of happened in the last 6 months to a year that they began to call lies lies. And I think the news media has got to step up and say, this is not true, this is true, this is not true. And for the longest time they weren't really willing to do that. They danced around it, and they decided, a lot of these news organizations decided in the last year to quit dancing around it. And it may take a while to deprogram some people who have bought all these lies, but they've got to be told this is a lie.